Here I am back at Parenting Pause after a few weeks off. And that's what I'd love to talk about this week is one of my favorite topics, which I've talked about before here. But let's dive a little bit deeper into trusting yourself. Whew. Now, I recognize that one of the greatest things I wanted to offer my daughter was an environment where she learned to trust herself. But that made it really hard when I wanted her to trust my knowing. And I have a lot of knowing. I mean, I'm an adult, so are you. So I have a lot of experience, I will say. I don't know if I have knowing, but I have a lot of experience that I could share with my daughter. And yet, when I made that as if it were the only experience or the only truth, it made it really hard for her to have a different experience and to start to trust herself. And I recognize that it was especially hard for me to trust myself in the parenting world because I had a little bit of a disturbing childhood for me. And so I had all these ideas about how I wanted to be different and how I wanted to give her something that I didn't get. And so it made it really hard to trust myself because I knew a lot of the things where I was doing that I'd read I was supposed to do on both sides, on the traditional side, on the conscious parenting side, they didn't feel really right for me in my relationship with my daughter. And yet I was really scared to trust myself because then, I had to come up against my desire to fit in, my desire to do the right thing. And so it made it challenging to really keep moving back a little bit from the culture, not out of the culture because I'm in the culture and I'm immersed in the culture, so is my daughter. But to actually shut my ears down a little bit to all the advice and all of the things that I was supposed to do because I flipped over to conscious parenting, and you might too, because I didn't want to do what my mom did. And yet those didn't feel totally right either with my child. So I had to find my way. And that it still requires trusting myself. So when we say that, it's like, well, who am I, right? Who am I trusting? Because a lot of who I was or am still as a parent is my conditioning and my template, everything that I learned growing up, everything that I had, my relationship with my parents, everything that I believe. A lot of that was what I was parenting out of instead of sitting and listening and actually having my experience. That's what I'd love to share. It's like, what was my experience with my daughter when I overpowered her or I was powerful or I was trying to enforce things or push or pull or force her to do what I wanted her to do? Well, my experience wasn't a great one. I didn't feel real good inside. She didn't feel really good inside. So I thought, well, maybe there's another way. If I trust myself, I know my daughter. You know your children better than any expert. You're with them 24/7. So I knew my daughter. I knew when she was cooperative. I knew how that worked with us. So it was like, well, what if I trust myself? Even though all the experts will say you need to come down hard or you need to set a boundary, you need to do this. I began to question it all. It's like, how would anybody, when they say all children need something, how would anybody know what my child needs? Now, of course, there's an overview, but I have a relationship with my daughter. She's unique. She's different. She has her own needs. So do your children. You'll know this, especially if you have more than one child, how different they are, how one may move towards something, the other toward another. One may be cooperative if you treat them in a certain way, the other one may not. So, excuse me. So this week, play with this. Take some time, play with what you know about yourself and your children and see if you can shake it up a little bit instead of trusting all the experts, trusting all the advice. Listen and see what you think, but don't just take it as a given, as truth. See what it's like to trust yourself, because the more you do this, in my experience, the more I was open to creating that environment for my daughter to trust herself, because I'm telling you, she's 24 now, and I need her to trust herself, or she needs to trust herself, or it's really important that she trust her instincts, her knowing what works for her, instead of putting her power outside into me. Now, she still can come to me. She did the other day to ask me my advice on something and what would I do. But even in that, I don't ever really give her the answer. I tell her what I would do, and then I support her in knowing that I believe that she knows what to do. I may state some of the facts and go through that with her. But I never take the role of, I know what's better for you. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I missed being here. And I hope you have a fabulous week. And we'll see you next week on Parenting Paused.